You will rot in prison. 15-year-old girl sentenced to life for killing father. We'd love to hear from you. Comment your city below before we jump into the story. Enjoy. The morning of October 12th began like any other in Oak Ridge, a town where neighbors still knew each other's names and most people left their doors unlocked at night. The kind of place where the worst crime in the police blotter was usually a stolen bicycle or teenagers spray painting the water tower. Eileen Winters, a 73-year-old widow who lived across from the stately Garrison residence, was walking her poodle Muffin along Maple Street when she heard it, a dull, muffled sound that cut through the crisp autumn air. Not quite a gunshot, more like a heavy object falling. Muffin's ears perked up, and the dog began barking frantically at the imposing colonial house with its perfect white columns. It was strange, Eileen would later tell investigators. I've lived here 30 years, and I've never heard all the neighborhood dogs start barking at once like that. It was like they sensed something wasn't right. Inside the Garrison home, sunlight filtered through heavy curtains, casting long shadows across the judge's private library. The room was meticulously organized. Law books arranged alphabetically, family photographs in sterling silver frames, each one positioned at a precise angle. A leather-bound book slowly slid from the shelf, landing with a soft thud on the plush carpet. Behind the massive mahogany desk, Judge Richard Garrison sat motionless in his chair, a dark stain spread across his crisp white shirt, pooling beneath him on the antique Persian rug, a wedding gift from his late wife Eleanor. The 911 call came in at 9:42 a.m. Oak Ridge Emergency Services. I think something's happened. The Garrison house. Judge Garrison's house. What's your emergency, ma'am? I'm the neighbor. I heard a noise and now no one's answering the door. But his car is here, and that's not like Richard. He's always so punctual. By 10:15 a.m., the quiet residential street was transformed. Police. Cruisers with flashing lights and ambulance crime scene tape fluttering in the breeze. Neighbors gathered on their lawns, whispering behind cupped hands. News traveled fast in Oak Ridge. Detective Marcus Reynolds arrived at 10:23 a.m., his weathered face betraying no emotion as he ducked under the police tape. At 54, he'd seen his share of tragedy in 30 years on the force, but nothing like what awaited him inside. "Where's the daughter?" were his first words upon seeing the judge's body. Officers found Eva Garrison, 15, in her upstairs bedroom. She was sitting perfectly still on the edge of her bed, staring out the window at the gathering crowd. Her hands were clean, her expression blank. No tears, no visible reaction when told her father was dead. "She's in shock," the paramedic suggested. But something about the girl's composure unsettled Reynolds. In his experience, shock looked different. This was something else. As Eva was escorted from the house, cameras from the local news station captured her face. Pale, expressionless, almost eerily calm. For a split second, so brief most viewers would miss it on first viewing, something flickered across her features. Was it grief, fear, or was it relief? Judge Richard Garrison, respected pillar of our community, was found dead this morning in what police are calling suspicious circumstances, reported Sandra Chen of Channel 8 News. His 15-year-old daughter has been taken in for questioning. Sources close to the investigation tell us that in recent weeks, neighbors had reported hearing heated arguments between the judge and his teenage daughter. What had happened behind the perfect white columns of the Garrison home that morning? What had transformed a respected judge and his honor roll daughter into the centerpiece of what would become the most shocking case in Oak Ridge history? And why? When Detective Reynolds asked Eva directly if she knew what happened to her father, did she simply reply, "Some truths are better left buried, detective. Just like my mother was." The Oak Ridge Police Department's interview room was deliberately austere. Beige walls, fluorescent lighting that buzzed intermittently, and a metal table bolted to the floor. Eva Garrison sat alone, her posture unnaturally straight, hands folded in her lap. The clock on the wall read 1:37 p.m. Detective Marcus Reynolds watched her. Through the one-way glass, coffee cooling in his hand. 30 years on the force had taught him to read people, but Eva was proving difficult to decipher. "What do we know about her?" Reynolds asked Officer Davis, who stood beside him with a thin file folder. Eva Garrison, 15 years old, 4.0. GPA at Oak Ridge High. No disciplinary record. Mother died 2 years ago, car accident on Route 16. Father was Judge Richard Garrison, as you know. Reynolds nodded. And what physical evidence do we have? Judge was shot once, close range. Weapon is his own .38 revolver, usually kept locked in his desk drawer. Key to the drawer was in his pocket. Preliminary forensics found gunshot residue on Eva's right sleeve and her fingerprints on the gun. Reynolds frowned. Too neat. Inside the interview room, Eva's face remained impassive as Reynolds entered and sat opposite her. She didn't fidget or avoid eye contact like most teenagers would. Instead, she watched him with an unnerving steadiness. "I'd like to speak with my father's attorney," she said before Reynolds could begin. "You're entitled to legal representation," Reynolds replied, "but I should inform you that you're not being charged with anything. We're just trying to understand what happened." "Nevertheless," Eva said, her voice steady, "I'd prefer to have counsel present." While they waited for an attorney, the evidence team made a disturbing discovery in the Garrison home. In the fireplace of the judge's study, they found the remains of a partially burned letter. Only fragments were legible. "Know what you did to her. Can't keep hiding the truth. We'll make sure everyone knows." The handwriting analysis would later confirm it was Eva's. In Eva's bedroom, investigators found a diary hidden between her mattress and box spring. The most recent entry, dated just 3 days before the murder, read, "He thinks he's untouchable. He thinks no one will ever know. But I know, and I can't live with this knowledge anymore. Something has to change. Something has to end." At Oak Ridge High School, Eva's teachers and classmates expressed disbelief at her potential involvement in her father's death. "She was brilliant, but distant," said Mrs. Hoffman, Eva's AP psychology teacher. "The kind of student who always had the right answer, but never shared more than was necessary." A classmate, Zach Teller, provided a different perspective. During a psychology project last semester about criminal profiling, Eva said something that creeped everyone out. She said she'd researched how to make a death look like suicide, how to clean crime scenes. We thought she was just being thorough for the assignment. Jennifer Dawson, the school psychologist who had counseled Eva after her mother's death, spoke carefully about her former patient. Eva processed grief differently. She was analytical rather than emotional. She asked questions about death that were unusually technical, especially for a 13-year-old who just lost her mother. As the day progressed, more details about the Garrison household emerged. Martha Wilson, who had worked as their housekeeper for over a decade, revealed that tensions between father and daughter had escalated in recent weeks. They argued about a safe in his office, Martha told detectives. "I overheard him telling her to stay away from it, that some things weren't for her to know." Eva said something back. I couldn't hear exactly what, but the judge went white as a sheet. By nightfall, a court-appointed attorney, Daniel Harmon, had arrived to represent Eva. Young and idealistic at 32, Harmon had moved to Oak Ridge just a year earlier, hoping to escape the cynicism of his previous job at a big city public defender's office. "Has she been charged?" were his first words to Reynolds. "Not yet, but we found this in the judge's fireplace." Reynolds slid a photocopy of the burned letter fragments across the desk. "And this in her room." He added a copy of the diary entry. Harmon's face remained professional, but his eyes betrayed his concern as he read. Meanwhile, forensics confirmed what Reynolds had suspected. The murder weapon had Eva's fingerprints in places that suggested she had fired it. But something else troubled him. The medical examiner's preliminary report placed the judge's time of death between 8:30 and 9:30 a.m., but phone records showed a call made from the house at 9:40 a.m., exactly when Eva claimed to have been in the shower. Who made that call? And why was the judge's personal calendar missing the pages for the week before his murder? As Eva was formally brought in for further questioning, she looked at Reynolds with those unnervingly calm eyes and said something that would haunt him for months to come. "Detective, have you ever considered that sometimes a perfect crime isn't hiding the truth, but making everyone look for the wrong one. The Garrison family home stood as a monument to old money and respectability. 3 stories of colonial architecture with a manicured lawn and a reputation for hosting the town's most prestigious dinner parties. Today, it was surrounded by yellow police tape, its perfect facade now marred by the shadow of murder. Detective Reynolds ducked under the tape for his 3rd visit in 2 days. The initial evidence collection was complete, but Reynolds had learned over his career that houses, like people, revealed their secrets slowly. "What are we looking for exactly?" asked Officer Davis, trailing behind. "Context," Reynolds replied. "I want to understand who Judge Garrison really was, not just who he appeared to be." The judge's reputation in Oak Ridge was sterling, tough but fair on the bench, generous with charitable donations, a widower who had raised his daughter alone after his wife's tragic accident. But Reynolds knew that public personas often concealed private realities. In the judge's study, Reynolds examined the wall of photographs. The largest showed a younger Richard Garrison with his wife Eleanor, and a small, smiling Eva, perhaps 7 years old. The family resemblance was striking, particularly between mother and daughter. "Mrs. Wilson," Reynolds called to the housekeeper, who was permitted on the premises to assist the investigation. "How would you describe the relationship between Judge Garrison and his wife before her death?" Martha Wilson twisted her hands in her apron. "They were different people in private than in public, Detective." "Different how?" The judge was very controlling. Everything had to be just so. Mrs. Garrison walked on eggshells in her own home. Martha's eyes darted toward the staircase. After she died, he became even more strict with Eva, like he was afraid of losing control of her too. Reynolds noted the odd phrasing, losing control rather than losing her. Meanwhile, across town, Daniel Harmon was experiencing his own frustrations at the county courthouse. As Eva's appointed attorney, he had requested access to the judge's recent case files, but was meeting unexpected resistance. "These records should be public," Harmon argued to the court clerk, a thin woman with nervous eyes. "You'll need approval from Judge Crawford for any cases that weren't formally closed," she replied, not meeting his gaze. "Why? That's not standard procedure. It is for Judge Garrison's cases." At Oak Ridge High School, Officer Jenkins was interviewing Eva's classmates and teachers, building a profile of the teenager at the center of the investigation. "She was like 2 different people," explained Claire Patterson, described as Eva's closest friend. "Around adults, she was this perfect, polite honor student. But when it was just us, she'd say these intense things about justice and truth, how people who think they're above the law eventually fall the hardest." Claire hesitated before continuing. "A few weeks ago, Eva told me she'd found something terrible about her dad. She wouldn't say what, just that she finally understood what happened to her mom. I thought she was being dramatic." Claire's eyes welled with tears. "The night before it happened, she texted me saying, 'Whatever you hear tomorrow, remember that sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom.' I didn't know what she meant." Back at the Garrison home, Reynolds was methodically examining the judge's home office. The safe that Martha had mentioned was hidden behind a painting, a predictable hiding spot for a man otherwise so meticulous. Inside, Reynolds found financial records, a will, and a sealed envelope labeled, "In the event of my death." The contents were troubling. A letter detailing threats the judge believed he'd received related to cases involving the Westfield Industries, the town's largest employer. He specifically named Frank Miller, a fellow judge, as someone who might have information if anything happens to me. Reynolds slipped the letter into an evidence bag, mind racing with new possibilities. As the detective prepared to leave, something caught his eye. A sliver of paper trapped between the hardwood floor and the baseboard. Carefully extracting it with tweezers, he found a small receipt from Thompson's Pharmacy dated 3 days before the murder. The items purchased, rubbing alcohol, cotton balls, and latex gloves. The receipt was signed with a looping E. At the police station, Eva sat alone in a holding cell. Despite being a minor, the evidence was mounting to a point where the prosecutor was discussing trying her as an adult. She hadn't spoken since her cryptic comment to Reynolds, instead spending hours staring at the wall or writing in a notebook the guards had provided. When Harmon visited her that evening, he found her eerily composed. "They're building a case against you," he explained gently. "The burned letter, the diary, your fingerprints on the gun. They'll say you had motive. These arguments people overheard. I need you to help me understand what happened." Eva finally looked directly at him, her eyes revealing nothing. "Mr. Harmon, did you know that security cameras can be looped, that fingerprints can be transferred from one surface to another, that diaries can be written with the express purpose of being found?" Harmon felt a chill. "Are you saying the evidence was planted?" "I'm saying that nothing in that house is what it appears to be, including my father." Eva leaned forward, slightly. "Have you checked the home security system yet? The cameras recorded everything. At least they were supposed to." When Reynolds later reviewed the security footage, he discovered something alarming. The recording from 8:15 a.m. to 9:33 a.m. on the morning of the murder was missing. A perfect 18-minute gap that encompassed the estimated time of death. What was equally disturbing was that the system showed no signs of tampering. Whoever had deleted those crucial minutes knew exactly what they were doing. And as Reynolds dug deeper, he discovered something that changed the entire trajectory of the investigation. Judge Eleanor Garrison's autopsy report from 2 years earlier contained inconsistencies that suggested her car accident might not have been accidental at all. What if Eva wasn't the only Garrison hiding deadly secrets? The Oak Ridge County Courthouse stood imposingly in the town square, its marble steps worn by decades of footsteps seeking justice, or at least the appearance of it. Today, those steps were crowded with reporters, curious townsfolk, and protesters holding hastily made signs with messages like "Justice for Judge Garrison" and "Try her as an adult." Inside Courtroom B, the juvenile hearing to determine whether Eva Garrison would be tried as an adult was about to begin. The gallery was packed, the atmosphere tense with anticipation. Eva sat beside Daniel Harmon, her posture rigid, eyes forward. She wore a simple navy blue dress that made her look younger than her 15 years. A strategic choice by Harmon, who knew appearances mattered almost as much as evidence. "Remember," he whispered to her, "say as little as possible. Let me do the talking." Eva gave an almost imperceptible nod, her gaze never wavering from the empty judge's bench. District Attorney Thomas Bennett strode into the courtroom with the confidence of a man who rarely lost. At 48, Bennett had political aspirations beyond Oak Ridge, and he knew a high-profile case like this could either make or break his future career. "The state is prepared to present substantial evidence showing that Eva Garrison committed premeditated murder," Bennett announced as soon as proceedings began. "Given the heinous nature of the crime, the level of planning involved, and the defendant's clear understanding of her actions, we strongly urge the court to try her as an adult." Judge Helena Crawford, a former colleague of the murdered judge, presided over the hearing. Her face remained professionally impassive, but those who knew her noticed the slight tightening around her mouth whenever she looked at Eva. "Mr. Harmon, your response?" Judge Crawford asked. "Your Honor, my client is a 15-year-old child who recently lost her father in traumatic circumstances. The prosecution's eagerness to strip away the protections afforded to juveniles seems premature at best and prejudicial at worst." Bennett wasted no time presenting the state's case. Item by item, he laid out the evidence: Eva's fingerprints on the murder weapon, the gunshot residue on her sleeve, the burned letter fragments expressing rage toward her father, the damning diary entries, and witness statements about escalating arguments between father and daughter. Furthermore, Bennett continued, producing a plastic evidence bag. Officers found this receipt showing the defendant purchased materials commonly used to clean up crime scenes just days before the murder, demonstrating clear premeditation. Harmon leaned over to Eva. "Did you buy these things?" he whispered. "Yes," she replied without elaboration, her eyes still fixed forward. Detective Reynolds, seated in the back of the courtroom, watched Eva carefully. Something about the case continued to nag at him. It was too perfect, too clean. Teenagers who committed crimes of passion didn't typically plan so. meticulously, yet those who planned meticulously rarely left such obvious evidence. When it was Harmon's turn to speak, he approached the bench with a document. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit phone records from the Garrison residence. You'll note that a call was made at 9:40 a.m., approximately 10:00, minutes after the estimated time of death, to a number registered to Frank Miller, Judge Garrison's colleague." Judge Crawford frowned. "What is the relevance, Mr. Harmon?" Ava was in the shower at that time, as confirmed by the wet towels and bathroom humidity when officers arrived. She couldn't have made that call. Someone else was in the house when Judge Garrison was killed. Bennett scoffed. "Speculation. The defendant could easily have made the call and then showered. Then perhaps Judge Miller can clarify," Harmon countered. "I've subpoenaed him to testify about that call, but oddly, he seems to have left town suddenly yesterday." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Crawford rapped her gavel. "Mr. Harmon, this hearing is to determine trial status, not to litigate the case itself. With respect, Your Honor, if there's evidence suggesting my client's innocence, that directly impacts whether this matter belongs in juvenile court." The back and forth continued for hours. Bennett painted Eva as a calculating killer who resented her father's strict parenting. Harmon portrayed her as a grieving daughter being railroaded by a justice system eager for a quick conviction. Throughout it all, Eva remained unnervingly still, her expression unreadable. Only once did her composure slip. When Bennett mentioned her mother's death, her hands tightened briefly on the table edge before relaxing again. Reynolds noticed. So did Judge Crawford. As the hearing neared its conclusion, Bennett played his final card. "Your Honor, we've recently recovered partial footage from the Garrison home security system." He nodded to a technician who set up a small monitor. "This was captured the morning of the murder." The grainy footage showed Eva in the hallway outside her father's study, listening at the door. She then walked away, returning moments later with what appeared to be a gun partially visible at her side. The timestamp read 8:27 a.m. Harmon was on his feet immediately. "Objection! This footage wasn't provided to the defense. It was only recovered last night," Bennett replied smoothly. As arguments erupted, Ava leaned over to Harmon and whispered something that made him freeze momentarily, before urgently scribbling a note. Judge Crawford's gavel crashed down. "Enough. I've heard sufficient evidence to make my determination." The courtroom fell, silent as she delivered her ruling. Given the nature of the evidence presented, the apparent premeditation, and the severity of the crime, this court finds that Eva Garrison should be tried as an adult for the murder of Judge Richard Garrison. The gallery erupted in a mix of approval and shocked gasps. Photographers' cameras flashed as Eva was led away by court officers. Only Reynolds noticed the single tear that finally escaped Eva's careful control, and the way her gaze lingered on someone in the back of the courtroom, a figure who slipped out the door before Reynolds could identify them. Back at the police station, Reynolds received a call from the forensics lab that would throw the entire case into question. The security footage Bennett had presented showed signs of digital manipulation. The timestamp had been altered, but if Eva hadn't been outside her father's study at 8:27, where had she been? And who wanted the court to believe she was there? The decision to try Eva Garrison as an adult sent shockwaves through Oak Ridge. The town of 12,000 had never seen a case that divided its residents so deeply. By morning, the local newspaper's headline read, "Judge's Daughter to face adult murder charges." At Caldwell's Diner, the town's unofficial hub for gossip, opinions flowed as freely as the coffee. "I always thought there was something off about that girl," said Doris Meyer, a retired school secretary. "Too quiet, too watchful, not normal for a teenager." "That's ridiculous," countered Bill Hawkins, who'd taught Eva in 8th grade science. "She was brilliant, just introverted. Doesn't make her a killer." Similar conversations played out across Oak Ridge, at the supermarket, the high school, the community center. A town that once viewed the Garrisons as its most prestigious family now dissected their private lives with morbid fascination. Channel 8 News ran a special segment titled "The Judge's Daughter, Angel or Demon," featuring interviews with neighbors, teachers, and self-proclaimed close friends of the family, many of whom had barely known them. Through it all, the Garrison house stood empty, a silent witness surrounded by police tape and curious onlookers who drove by slowly, hoping to glimpse something, anything, that might explain how tragedy had befallen such a perfect family. Claire Patterson sat in her bedroom staring at the last text message Eva had sent her. Whatever you hear tomorrow, remember that sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom. Claire hadn't shown the message to police yet. She wasn't sure why. Her mother knocked softly before entering. "Honey, Detective Reynolds is here. He'd like to speak with you." Again. Reynolds sat awkwardly on the floral couch in the Patterson living room, a notepad balanced on his knee. "Claire, I know you and Eva were close. Did she ever talk about her mother's death?" Claire twisted a strand of hair around her finger. "She changed after that. Before, Eva was, I don't know, more normal. She had emotions. After her mom died, it's like she put everything in a box and locked it away." "Did she believe it was an accident?" Claire hesitated. "At first. Then about 6 months ago, she started asking weird questions, like whether I knew how to find old newspaper articles or access sealed court records." "Did she say why?" "Not really. But one time we were studying at her house and Judge Garrison came home early. Eva had some papers spread out on her desk, and when she heard his car, she shoved everything into her backpack. I'd never seen her look scared before. She was always so controlled, you know. But in that moment she looked terrified. And you have no idea what those papers were?" "No. But after that day she started carrying a small key on a chain under her shirt. When I asked about it, she just said it was insurance." At the county jail, Eva was being processed into the adult detention center. The transition from juvenile holding to the county facility meant new surroundings, new rules, and being treated as an adult in the eyes of the law. Despite her youth, Eva showed no fear as she surrendered her few possessions, changed into an orange jumpsuit, and followed officers to her cell. "You get one phone call," a guard informed her. Eva nodded and dialed a number from memory. When the line connected, she spoke just 3 words. "It started now." Before hanging up, in his modest apartment, Daniel Harmon spread case files across his dining table. The security footage troubled him deeply. Not just the apparent manipulation Bennett had presented, but the original 18-minute gap Reynolds had discovered. Someone had tampered with evidence. Twice. His phone rang, Reynolds calling with news about the forensics report. "The timestamp was definitely altered," Reynolds confirmed. "But there's more. The receipt from Thompson's Pharmacy? We checked the store's security camera. Eva did purchase those items, but she wasn't alone." "Who was with her?" Harmon asked. "That's the thing. It was Judge Garrison himself. They seemed cooperative, not arguing, almost like they were working together on something." Harmon stared at the case files, pieces shifting in his mind. "That doesn't make sense unless what? Unless Eva isn't the only one who was hiding something." As night fell over, Oak Ridge, Martha Wilson returned to her small house after being interviewed again by police. She locked the door, checked the windows, and only then removed a small envelope from inside her bra. It had been given to her by Eva weeks before the murder, with strict instructions. "If anything happens, to me or my father, mail this to this address." Martha had kept it hidden, uncertain what to do. Now, hands trembling, she opened it. Inside was a single photograph. Judge Garrison shaking hands with a man Martha didn't recognize, both smiling in front of the Westfield Industries logo. Written on the back in Eva's neat handwriting were 7 words that made Martha's blood run cold. "They killed my mother. They'll kill me too." Daniel Harmon arrived at the county courthouse at 7:15 a.m., 2 hours before it officially opened. He'd called in a favor from a clerk he'd befriended during his short time in Oak Ridge, access to the archives without the usual bureaucratic obstacles. "You have until 8:30, the clerk whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "I never let you in." "Thank you, Diane. I owe you." The records room smelled of dust and aging paper. Harmon moved methodically through the filing system, focusing on Judge Garrison's cases from the past 5 years. He wasn't sure what he was looking for until he found it. A pattern. Every case involving Westfield Industries had been ruled in the company's favor, despite compelling evidence against them in at least 3 environmental violation suits. In each instance, key evidence had been deemed inadmissible on technicalities. Harmon photographed the relevant pages with his phone, working quickly. One name kept appearing in the documents: Edward Chambers, CEO of Westfield Industries. His search was interrupted by a text from Reynolds. Need to meet, found something, usual place, noon. Across town, Martha Wilson sat at her kitchen table, the photograph from Eva still in her trembling hands. Should she mail it as instructed? Go to the police? The man in the photo with Judge Garrison. Who was he, and what connection did he have to Eleanor Garrison's death? Her doorbell rang, startling her so badly she dropped her coffee mug. It shattered on the linoleum floor. Through the peephole she saw Detective Reynolds, his weathered face serious in the morning light. "Mrs. Wilson," he said when she opened the door. "I need to ask you about something that's been bothering me. The night before Judge Garrison's murder, phone records show he called you at 11:42 p.m., a call lasting 6 minutes. Can you tell me what that was about?" Martha's face paled. He asked me not to come to work the next day, said he and Eva needed privacy to discuss family matters. Did that strike you as unusual? Everything about the judge had been unusual in those last weeks. He was paranoid, checking the locks repeatedly, installing new security cameras. He kept saying someone was watching the house. Reynolds made notes, then looked up sharply. "Mrs. Wilson, is there something you're not telling me?" Martha's eyes darted to the kitchen table where the photograph lay, but she shook her head. "Nothing relevant, Detective. At noon, Harmon and Reynolds met at a fishing spot by the lake, away from prying eyes and potential listening devices, a precaution that would have seemed paranoid just days earlier. The security footage was definitely tampered with," Reynolds began without preamble. "But here's what's interesting. It wasn't amateur work. This was professional-grade editing. Someone with resources." Harmon mused. "Exactly. And there's more. I looked deeper into Eleanor Garrison's accident. The investigating officer noted unusual brake damage, but was ordered to close the case by his superior." Who was his superior? Chief Williams, who retired suddenly a month later with a generous pension. Guess who sits on the police pension board? Harmon's eyes widened. Edward Chambers. Bingo. The same man who benefited from at least 7 favorable rulings from Judge Garrison. But here's where it gets really interesting. Reynolds pulled out his phone, showing Harmon a document. 2 months before her death, Eleanor Garrison filed for divorce. Was that public knowledge? No, the filing was sealed, then withdrawn 3 days later, and look at the date it was withdrawn. The date matched a substantial deposit into the Garrison family account, $250,000 from an offshore company that, with some digging, Reynolds had traced back to a Westfield Industries subsidiary. So, Judge Garrison was being bribed by Westfield, Harmon concluded. But why kill him if he was playing ball? Maybe he stopped playing ball, or threatened to expose something. Or maybe, Reynolds hesitated. Maybe, what? Maybe Eva found out. About her mother's death not being an accident. About her father's corruption. Back at the county jail, Eva sat in the visitation room, waiting for her attorney. Instead, a stranger entered, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an FBI badge. "Eva Garrison, I'm Special Agent Catherine Morgan. We need to talk about Westfield Industries, your father, and a USB drive that we believe you possess." Eva's carefully maintained composure faltered for the first time. "How do you know about that?" "We've been investigating Westfield for 2 years. Your mother contacted us shortly before her death." Eva's eyes widened, a genuine reaction breaking through her mask. "My mother was working with the FBI?" At that moment, the lights in the jail flickered, then went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. When emergency lighting came on seconds later, Agent Morgan was on the floor, a syringe protruding from her neck, and Eva was screaming for help. But her screams couldn't drown out the jail's alarm system, which indicated something far more urgent. Despite the facility being in lockdown, somehow an exterior door had been breached. Someone had broken into the jail. Chaos erupted at the county jail. Alarms blared as guards rushed toward the breach point, while others secured inmates in their cells. In the visitation room, medical personnel worked frantically on Agent Morgan, who was unresponsive but still breathing, the syringe now sealed. In an evidence bag, Eva had been moved to a secure holding area, a small room with no windows and a steel door. For the first time since her arrest, genuine fear showed on her face. "What happened to Agent Morgan?" she demanded of the guard stationed outside her door. "Some kind of fast-acting sedative," he replied curtly. "She'll live." Eva leaned against the wall, mind racing. Someone had known about her meeting with the FBI agent. Someone had been watching. Across town, Judge Frank Miller pulled into the parking lot of the Oak Ridge Motor Lodge, a rundown establishment on the outskirts of town that catered to truckers and people who didn't want to be found. He'd been avoiding Detective Reynolds' calls for days. Miller checked in under a false name and paced the shabby room, jumping at every sound. His phone rang, an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Running was foolish, Frank," said a voice he recognized immediately. "It draws attention." "I had no choice," Miller replied, his voice shaking. "The detective is asking questions about the call from Garrison's house. I can't explain that." "You won't have to. The situation is being handled." "Like, you handled Richard?" Miller's fear was giving way to anger. "This has gone too far. I never signed up for murder." "You signed up the moment you accepted your first payment, 15 years ago. Remember that environmental case that paid for your vacation home in Aspen?" Miller sank onto the bed, the fight draining from him. "What do you want me to do?" "Come back to Oak Ridge, say you were at a medical appointment out of town, act normal. We'll take care of the rest." The line went dead, leaving Miller alone with his regrets. Meanwhile, Reynolds and Harmon had rushed to the jail after hearing about the breach and attack on the FBI agent. They found the facility on lockdown, with county police and state troopers securing the perimeter. "What the hell happened?" Reynolds demanded of the sheriff. "Professional job," the sheriff replied grimly. "They cut the power from a junction box. Outside, disabled 2 security cameras, and picked a high-security lock in under 30 seconds. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing, and their target was the FBI agent," Harmon concluded. "Or what she knew," Reynolds added. "Where's Eva now?" "Secure holding. She's fine, just shaken." Up. When they were finally allowed to see Eva, she'd regained her composure, though her eyes darted occasionally to the door as if expecting another intrusion. "Eva," Harmon began gently. "Agent Morgan, do you know why she wanted to speak with you?" "She said my mother had been in contact with the FBI before she died." Eva's voice was steady but quiet. "She mentioned a USB drive." Reynolds and Harmon exchanged glances. "Do you have such a drive?" Reynolds asked. Eva studied them both carefully before answering. "Not anymore. I hid it." "Where?" "Somewhere safe." She leaned forward. "Someone just broke into a county jail to stop that FBI agent from talking to me. Do you really think I'm going to tell you where it is?" Harmon respected her caution. "Can you at least tell us what's on it?" Eva's eyes grew distant. "Evidence. My mother was collecting it for months before she died. Financial records, photographs, recordings of conversations between my father and Edward Chambers. Proof that Westfield was deliberately contaminating the groundwater in Oak Ridge's east side, where cancer rates have been mysteriously high for a decade. And your father was helping cover it up." Reynolds concluded. Eva nodded. "My mother found out. She was going to expose them both. Then she had her accident." "And you think your father was involved in her death?" Harmon asked. "I know he was." For the first time, raw emotion cracked through Eva's careful facade. "I heard him on the phone. The night she died, telling someone it had been taken care of." The implications hung heavy in the air. Back at the Garrison house, now abandoned and still cordoned off as a crime scene, a figure moved silently through the darkened rooms. They knew exactly what they were looking for, methodically, checking hiding places that the police had missed. The intruder paused in Eva's bedroom, running experienced hands along the edges of floorboards, tapping for hollow sounds. A triumphant smile crossed their face as one board gave way, revealing a small cavity beneath. But it was empty. In some frustration, the intruder swept papers from Eva's desk, freezing when something fluttered out from between the pages of a school textbook. a detailed hand-drawn map of what appeared to be Oak Ridge Memorial Park, with a small X marked next to the statue of the town's founder. As dawn broke over, Oak Ridge, Martha Wilson made her decision. With trembling hands, she dialed Detective Reynolds' number. "There's something I need to show you," she said when he answered. "Something Eva gave me for safekeeping." Before Reynolds could respond, the sound of breaking glass echoed through the phone, followed by Martha's terrified scream. Then silence. Reynolds raced to Martha Wilson's house, siren blaring. The morning sky had darkened with storm clouds, matching the dread that filled him. Martha's abrupt scream and the call's sudden end left little room for optimism. When he arrived, the front doctor stood ajar, swinging gently in the wind. Inside, signs of a struggle were evident. An overturned chair, shattered glass from a broken window, a telephone lying on the floor with its cord ripped from the wall. But no Martha. Reynolds moved carefully through the small house, gun drawn, clearing each room. In the kitchen, he found droplets of fresh blood on the linoleum floor and something else, a crumpled photograph beneath the refrigerator, as if hastily hidden. He retrieved it with a gloved hand, Judge Garrison shaking hands with a gray-haired man Reynolds didn't recognize. Both standing before the Westfield Industries logo. On the back, in neat handwriting, "They killed my mother. They'll kill me, too." Reynolds was examining the photo when his radio crackled. "Detective, we've got a situation at the county jail," came the dispatcher's voice. "Judge Frank Miller is here, demanding to speak with Eva Garrison. Says it's a matter of life and death." "Keep him there," Reynolds ordered. "Don't let him anywhere near her." At the county jail, Frank Miller paced the lobby, his normally dignified demeanor replaced by agitation. Sweat stained the underarms of his expensive shirt despite the room's chill. When Reynolds arrived, Miller's relief was palpable. "Detective, thank God. I need protection. Witness protection. I know things. About Richard's death, about Westfield, about all of it." Reynolds studied the judge carefully. "Let's talk somewhere private." In a small interview room, Miller's story poured out in a torrent of fear and guilt. It started 15 years ago with a simple favor, ruling in Westfield's favor on a minor zoning issue. Edward Chambers made it worth my while. Just a taste, but enough to hook me. Richard, too. Judge Garrison was on Westfield's payroll? Miller nodded miserably. "We all were, judges, police chiefs, even the mayor. Chambers owns this town. And Eleanor Garrison found out. She was collecting evidence, building a case. When Chambers discovered what she was doing, Miller's voice broke. Richard gave the order himself, his own wife." Reynolds felt sick. And Eva, did she know? She suspected. Recently, she'd been asking questions, accessing court records. Richard was worried she'd found something concrete. The night before he died, he called me in a panic, saying Eva had been in his study, going through his safe. "So Chambers had the judge killed too?" Reynolds pressed. Miller looked up, confusion crossing his face. "Chambers? No, you don't understand. It was Eva. Eva killed her father. Across town, Daniel Harmon was working with Linda Morris, an audio forensics specialist who owed him a favor from a previous case. They huddled over her computer, analyzing the recovered portions of Eva's interrogation. There, Linda pointed to a waveform on her screen. This section was edited. They spliced together different responses to make it sound like a confession. Can you recover the original? Parts of it. Linda's fingers flew over the keyboard. Listen. The recording played, Eva's voice coming through clearly. Did you kill your father? Asked the interrogator. The edited version had shown Eva responding with a cold yes, but the actual recording revealed a different answer. No, but I know who did and why. She never confessed, Harmon breathed. They doctored the evidence. Linda nodded grimly. And whoever did it had access to professional audio editing software and the original recordings. That means someone inside the police department. At the county jail, Eva sat cross-legged on her cot, eyes closed as if meditating. When a guard informed her that her attorney had arrived, she showed no reaction beyond a slight nod. Harmon found her eerily calm given the circumstances. The audio was doctored, he told her without preamble. You never confessed. I know. Eva, I need you to be straight with me. Did you kill your father? Eva's eyes opened, fixing on him with unnerving intensity. What do you think? Before Harmon could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility for the second time in 24 hours. Lockdown. Procedures initiated automatically, steel doors sliding shut throughout the complex. What now? Harmon muttered. The guard rushed in. Sir, you need to leave immediately. We have a situation. What kind of situation? Someone released an unknown chemical agent into the ventilation system. Possible terrorist attack. Everyone's being evacuated. As they hurried down the corridor, Eva suddenly grabbed Harmon's arm, her fingers digging in with surprising strength. This is a distraction, she hissed in his ear. They're creating chaos to get to me. Who? The same people who killed Martha Wilson an hour ago. Harmon froze. How could you possibly know that? Eva's expression was grim. Because I've been 3 steps ahead of them from the beginning. Until now. Through the growing confusion of the evacuation, neither noticed the maintenance worker watching them from the shadows, speaking quietly into a concealed radio. Target in sight, moving to extraction point now. The Oak Ridge County Courthouse buzzed with tension on the first day of Eva Garrison's murder trial. Media trucks lined the street outside, reporters jostling for position on the marble steps. Inside, the gallery was packed with spectators eager to witness what had become the most sensational case in the town's history. Eva sat beside Daniel Harmon at the defense table, her posture perfect, expression neutral. She wore a simple navy dress with a white collar, youthful but respectful, another strategic choice by her attorney. Across the aisle, District Attorney Bennett arranged his notes meticulously, occasionally glancing at Eva with barely concealed disdain. Judge Crawford entered, and the proceedings began with opening statements. Bennett painted a picture of a calculating teenager who murdered her father in cold blood, methodically planning and executing the crime. The evidence will show that Eva Garrison purchased materials to clean up the crime scene days in advance, Bennett told the jury. That she wrote about her intentions in her diary, that her fingerprints were on the murder weapon, that she was caught on camera approaching her father's study with a gun. When Harmon's turn came, he approached the jury box slowly, his expression somber. What if everything you've been shown is a carefully constructed lie? He began. The prosecution's case looks perfect. Because it was designed to look perfect. Too perfect. My client has been framed by people with resources, influence, and a desperate need to silence Judge Garrison. The same people who silenced his wife 2 years earlier when she discovered their crimes. As witnesses took the stand, the prosecution's narrative began to unravel in unexpected ways. The forensics expert who had initially confirmed Eva's fingerprints on the gun stumbled under Harmon's cross-examination. Could these fingerprints have been transferred from another object? Harmon asked. Well, yes, it's possible, but... And isn't it true that the position of the prints doesn't match how someone would naturally hold a gun when firing? The expert hesitated. That is correct. By mid-afternoon, Reynolds had slipped into the back of the courtroom, watching the proceedings with intense focus. The investigation into Martha Wilson's disappearance had yielded nothing yet, but forensics had identified the gray-haired man in the photograph as Edward Chambers, CEO of Westfield Industries. Suddenly, the courtroom doors opened, and a tall, distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit entered. The man's confident stride and the deference shown by the bailiff marked him as someone of importance. Eva, who had maintained perfect composure throughout the day, visibly tensed, her eyes widening in unmistakable fear. For the first time since her arrest, Eva Garrison looked genuinely terrified. The man took a seat in the back row, directly in Reynolds' line of sight. Their eyes met briefly before Reynolds looked away, pretending disinterest while memorizing every detail of the stranger's appearance. As the judge called a recess, Eva leaned toward Harmon, whispering urgently. Before she could finish, she swayed in her seat, her face suddenly pale. She pressed a hand to her mouth, then collapsed, her body convulsing violently on the courtroom floor. She's been poisoned, Harmon shouted, as chaos erupted in the courtroom. Get a doctor. In the confusion, Reynolds noticed the distinguished man slipping quietly out a side door, and something else, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Eva Garrison lay unconscious in the county hospital, an IV dripping fluids into her arm, a police officer stationed outside her door. The diagnosis: atropine poisoning, likely administered through the water bottle she'd been drinking from in court. Someone had wanted her silenced, permanently. Daniel Harmon paced the hospital corridor, torn between concern for his client and frustration at the case's mounting complexities. The trial had been suspended, indefinitely, but that was the least of his worries. Someone had just tried to murder a 15-year-old girl in open court. Reynolds approached, his face grim. Security footage shows a cleaning crew entering the courtroom last night. One of them handled the defense table's water bottles. We're running facial recognition, but I'm not optimistic. They kept their heads down. Professional hit, Harmon muttered. Like everything else about this case. Reynolds glanced toward Eva's room. Any change? Doctors say she'll recover, but she hasn't regained consciousness yet. The men fell. Silent, both processing the implications. If someone was willing to poison a teenage defendant in a packed courtroom, what else might they do? Back at the station, a new development threw the case into further disarray. The gas station security footage that had shown Eva purchasing cleaning supplies had been reviewed more thoroughly, and now revealed something the prosecution had conveniently overlooked. She wasn't alone, Officer Davis explained, showing Reynolds the enhanced footage. Judge Garrison was with her. They were shopping together, normal as anything. Doesn't look like a girl. Planning to murder her father. Reynolds frowned. Bennett had to have seen this. He deliberately misrepresented the evidence. Meanwhile, Claire Patterson had disappeared. Her parents reported her missing that morning, saying she hadn't come home the previous night. Her last known communication: a text to her mother saying she remembered something important about the night of Judge Garrison's murder and needed to find Reynolds. She never did. The case against Eva seemed to be crumbling. The doctored confession, the manipulated security footage, the misleading gas station video. Yet just as public opinion began shifting in her favor, the prosecution revealed their most damning evidence yet. We recovered this from a hidden compartment in Eva Garrison's bedroom, Bennett announced at an impromptu press conference, holding up a plastic evidence bag containing a USB drive. It contains detailed plans for her father's murder, written in her own words, along with research on how to evade detection. This premeditation goes back 6 months. The media erupted with questions, cameras flashing. Bennett played his role perfectly, appearing reluctant but duty-bound to reveal this shocking evidence. When Harmon saw the news, he knew immediately something was wrong. Eva had already told him about a USB drive, but it contained evidence of Westfield's crimes and her father's corruption, not murder plans. They've created a fake, he realized, pulling out his phone to call Reynolds. At EUO. That moment, a nurse rushed out of Eva's hospital room, frantically calling for a doctor. Inside, alarms blared as Eva's vital signs plummeted. "She's coding!" shouted an emergency physician, pushing past Harmon. "Get a crash cart in here!" As medical staff fought to revive Eva, Reynolds noticed something alarming. The guard assigned to her door was missing, and a hospital maintenance worker was hurrying down the hallway, head down, moving too quickly. "Stop that man!" Reynolds shouted, drawing his weapon. But the worker had already disappeared through an exit door, leaving behind only a white security camera that now pointed at the ceiling instead of the corridor, and Eva Garrison fighting for her life, her secret still locked inside her unconscious mind. Eva Garrison survived. Barely. The doctors called it a miracle, but Reynolds suspected it was something else. The mysterious maintenance worker had been captured on a single frame of security footage, injecting something into Eva's IV line. Whatever it was had been meant to kill her, but perhaps the dosage had been miscalculated for someone so young. 3 days after the courtroom collapse, with Eva still under heavy guard at the hospital, an unexpected discovery changed everything. A real estate agent preparing the Garrison house for sale found something hidden in the base of a bedside lamp, a small recording device, still operational. It was professionally installed, the tech explained to Reynolds as they examined it in the evidence room. High-quality audio capture, motion activated. with enough memory to record for weeks. When they played the recordings, Judge Garrison's voice filled the room, crystal clear despite the recording's clandestine nature. Most were mundane phone calls or one-sided conversations, until they reached a recording from 2 weeks before his death. "I can't do this anymore, Edward." The judge's voice trembled with rare emotion. "The cover-up has gone too far. People are dying because of that contamination." A second voice responded, smooth and controlled. "We've been through this, Richard. You're in far too deep to develop a conscience now. Remember who authorized Eleanor's accident. That was never supposed to happen. You promised you'd just scare her. Plans change. Speaking of which, your daughter is becoming a problem. She's been accessing court records, asking questions, like mother, like daughter." The recording ended with Judge Garrison's response. "I'll handle Eva. Just no more accidents. Promise me." Reynolds and Harmon exchanged looks of shock. The recording not only implicated Edward Chambers in Eleanor Garrison's death, but suggested the judge had been trying to protect Eva from a similar fate. But if Judge Garrison had been trying to protect his daughter, who had killed him? And why had Eva been so convinced of her father's guilt? The answer came from an unexpected source. Martha Wilson's abandoned car was found in a ravine 40 miles outside town, but no body. Inside the trunk, investigators discovered a waterproof container holding what appeared to be Eleanor Garrison's personal journal. The journal painted a disturbing picture. Eleanor had discovered Westfield's illegal dumping of carcinogens, and her husband's role in covering it up. She'd been gathering evidence for months, planning to go public. The final entry, dated 1 day before her death, read, "Richard knows I've found everything. He tried to buy my silence with threats, then with promises. When those failed, I saw something in his eyes I've never seen before. I've hidden copies of all evidence for Eva to find when she's older. The key to the storage unit is in her music box. She'll know which one." Reynolds immediately ordered officers to return to the Garrison house and locate Eva's music boxes. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Eva had regained consciousness. Pale but alert, she spoke quietly to Harmon in her heavily guarded room. "I didn't kill my father," she stated, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube that had saved her life. "I believe you," Harmon replied. "But Eva, why did you let everyone think you did?" "Because it was safer that way." Eva's eyes darted to the door, checking for listeners. "I found my mother's evidence weeks ago. The USB drive, the recordings, everything. I confronted my father with it the night before he died." "What did he say?" "He confessed to covering up Westfield's crimes, but swore. He didn't know they were going to kill her. He was crying, Mr. Harmon. I'd never seen him cry before." Eva paused, struggling with the memory. "He said he was going to make it right, that he had a plan to expose Chambers and the whole operation. He told me to be ready to run." "Then who shot him?" "I don't know. I heard the gunshot from the shower. When I ran downstairs, he was already—" Her voice broke. "There was a man standing over him. He looked at me and I knew I was next. But then a car pulled up outside and he ran." Before Harmon could ask who the man was, his phone rang. It was Reynolds, his voice urgent. "We found something in Eva's childhood music box. Not a key, but a map. It shows a location in Oak Ridge Memorial Park, by the founder's statue. We're heading there now." "Wait," Harmon said. "Eva's awake. She says she didn't kill her father. She saw someone standing over his body." There was a long pause before Reynolds replied. "Ask her if she can identify who it was." Harmon lowered the phone. "Eva, the man you saw, would you recognize him again?" Eva nodded, her eyes haunted. "It was Judge Frank Miller, my father's closest friend." Oak Ridge Memorial Park, sprawled across 30 acres of manicured lawns and ancient oak trees. In daylight, it was peaceful, a place for picnics and leisurely walks. But as dusk fell, the lengthening shadows transformed it into a labyrinth of dark corners and hidden spaces. Reynolds led a small team toward the center of the park where the bronze statue of town founder William Oakridge stood sentinel. They moved cautiously, aware that if Eva's mother had hidden something here, others might be searching for it too. "There," Officer Davis pointed to the statue's marble base. "Look at those scrape marks. Recent Scratches marred the stone near the western face of the monument. Reynolds knelt, running his fingers along the base until he felt a slight depression. Pressing it released a hidden panel, revealing a small, waterproof container. Inside, a USB drive, sealed documents, and a voice recorder. "We need to secure this immediately," Reynolds said, sensing they were exposed. Back to the station now. They hadn't gone 10 steps when a shot rang out, the bullet striking the ground near Reynolds' feet. The team scattered, taking cover behind trees and monuments as 2 more shots followed. "Police! Drop your weapon!" Reynolds shouted, gun drawn, scanning for the shooter. Silence fell across the park, broken only by distant traffic sounds. After tense minutes with no further shots, they cautiously emerged, finding no trace of the would-be assassin. Meanwhile, at the county courthouse, Judge Frank Miller sat in his chambers, hands trembling as he poured his 3rd scotch. The news that Eva Garrison had survived and regained consciousness had reached him an hour ago. His carefully constructed world was unraveling thread by thread. His phone rang, the private line that only a select few possessed. "They found it," came the smooth voice of Edward Chambers. "My people lost them at the park." Miller closed his eyes in defeat. "It's over then." "Not necessarily. Reynolds is a problem, but problems can be solved." "No more killing," Miller whispered. "There's been too much already." "That's not your decision to make, Frank. Protect yourself. Deny everything. It's your word against a traumatized teenagers." At the police station, Reynolds and Harmon carefully reviewed Eleanor Garrison's hidden evidence. The USB drive contained financial records showing millions diverted from Westfield's environmental compliance budget, along with falsified safety reports. The sealed documents included medical records of Oak Ridge residents with elevated cancer rates, all living near Westfield's secret dumping sites. Most damning was the voice recorder. Eleanor had secretly taped conversations between her husband and Edward Chambers discussing the cover-up, with Judge Miller occasionally present. "This is enough to bring down Westfield and half the town government," Harmon said, stunned by the scope of the conspiracy. "If we can keep it safe," Reynolds replied. "The people involved have already killed to protect themselves. They won't stop now." The station door burst open as a breathless officer rushed in. "Detective, Judge Miller's been found dead in his chambers. Apparent suicide, gunshot to the head." Reynolds' eyes narrowed. Suicide? Or another loose end being tied up? A search of Miller's office revealed a handwritten confession claiming sole responsibility for Judge Garrison's murder, absolving both Eva and Westfield Industries of any wrongdoing. It was too neat, too convenient, but it would be compelling to a public hungry for closure. As news of Miller's death spread, the case against Eva Garrison began to collapse. The prosecution's evidence, already undermined by revelations of tampering, looked increasingly like an elaborate frame job. Public opinion, once solidly against the cold-blooded teenage killer, started shifting in Eva's favor. At the hospital, Eva listened silently as Harmon explained the latest developments. "So, it's over?" she asked, her voice small and disbelieving. "The case against you is falling apart," he confirmed. "But the bigger conspiracy? That fight is just beginning." Eva shook her head. "It's not. Viewer, Miller was just a pawn. As long as Chambers is free, none of us are safe." As if to underscore her point, the lights in the hospital corridor suddenly went out. Emergency generators kicked in seconds later, but by then, the guard outside Eva's door had disappeared. Harmon rushed to the door, locking it from the inside as heavy footsteps approached down the darkened hallway. "They're coming to finish what they started," Eva whispered, reaching beneath her pillow for something Harmon couldn't see. "And this time, I'm ready for them." The hospital corridor fell silent except for the steady approach of footsteps. Inside Eva's room, Harmon positioned himself by the door, his cell phone in hand, desperately trying to call Reynolds. No signal. Eva sat upright in her bed, unnervingly calm given the circumstances. From beneath her pillow, she produced a small canister, pepper spray that Claire had smuggled to her during an earlier visit. "How did you know they'd come?" Harmon whispered. Because I've been playing this game longer than you realize, Eva replied, her voice steady. My mother taught me to always be prepared. The doorknob rattled, then unexpectedly a woman's voice. Eva, Mr. Harmon, it's Agent Morgan, FBI. Harmon approached cautiously. Show identification through the window. An FBI badge pressed against the small window in the door. After verifying it, Harmon unlocked the door to admit the agent they'd last seen unconscious from a syringe attack. We need to move now, she said without preamble. Chambers knows we've recovered Eleanor's evidence. He's making arrangements to leave the country. How do you know? Harmon asked, still wary. Because we've had an undercover agent in his organization for months. The same person who's been trying to protect Eva. Eva's eyes widened. Martha Wilson. Agent Morgan nodded. Martha's fine. We extracted her when her cover was compromised. She's been working with us since shortly after your mother contacted the FBI. As they hurried through the hospital service corridors, Morgan explained that the FBI had been building a case against Westfield Industries for years, investigating environmental crimes across multiple states. Eleanor Garrison had been their key informant in Oak Ridge. Your mother was incredibly brave, Morgan told Eva. When she realized what was happening, she could have just taken you and run. Instead, she stayed to gather evidence. And it got her killed, Eva said flatly. Yes, but the evidence she collected, combined with what you found, is enough to bring down Westfield's entire operation and the government officials they corrupted. They reached a service exit, where an unmarked van waited. As they approached, gunshots rang out from the parking garage across the street. A man fell from behind a concrete pillar, one of Chambers' men, weapon still in hand. Standing over him was Detective Reynolds, his service pistol drawn. Sniper, Reynolds explained as he joined them. Nearly had a clear shot at you. We need to move. This area isn't secure. At the police station, tech experts worked to decrypt the final files on Eleanor's USB drive. What they found confirmed their worst suspicions. Westfield had knowingly dumped carcinogenic chemicals for over a decade, resulting in a cancer cluster affecting dozens of Oak Ridge families. Local officials, including Judges Garrison and Miller, had systematically dismissed lawsuits, buried evidence, and intimidated witnesses. This goes beyond Oak Ridge, Agent Morgan explained, showing them a map of Westfield. Operations across 5 states. We're talking about one of the largest environmental crimes in U.S. history. As federal agents moved to secure arrest warrants for Edward Chambers and his associates, Eva finally revealed the full story of the night her father died. I confronted him with everything I'd found, my mother's evidence plus what I'd gathered myself. He denied involvement in her death at first, but eventually confessed to covering up the environmental crimes. Eva's composure cracked slightly. He said he was going to make it right, that he had recorded conversations with Chambers. As insurance. Did he say where these recordings were? Reynolds asked. Eva shook her head. We were interrupted by a phone call. He told me to hide in my room, lock the door. I heard him arguing with someone on the phone, then the front door opened. I got in the shower to create an alibi. Plausible deniability. I thought he was finally going to stand up to them. Her voice faltered. When I heard the gunshot, I ran downstairs. Judge Miller was standing over my father's body with the gun. He looked at me and said, "This is what happens to traitors, Eva. Remember that." Then a car pulled up outside and he fled. Why didn't you tell us this from the beginning? Harmon asked gently. Because Miller wasn't working alone. I didn't know who to trust. Eva met his gaze directly. And because sometimes the best way to catch a killer is to let them think they've won. As night fell over Oak Ridge, federal agents raided Edward Chambers' estate, only to find he had vanished, along with the most incriminating recordings Judge Garrison had allegedly made. The investigation had hit a critical setback, until Eva smiled for the first time since her arrest and said 6 words that changed everything. Check the lining of my diary. The diary that had been central to the prosecution's case against Eva Garrison, the one containing damning entries about resenting her father, was carefully examined by FBI evidence technicians. They delicately separated the leather, binding from its interior, revealing a thin memory card hidden within the spine. "My mother taught me this trick," Eva explained as they transferred the card's contents to a secure computer. "Hide things where people think they've already found what they're looking for." The files contained audio, recordings Judge Garrison had secretly made during the final weeks of his life, conversations with Edward Chambers that detailed the full extent of Westfield's crimes, and the elaborate cover-up orchestrated through corrupted officials. In the most damning recording, dated the day before his murder, Garrison confronted Chambers about Eleanor's death. "You told me it would be an accident, just to scare her." The judge's voice trembled with suppressed rage. "These things happen," Chambers replied coldly. "The brakes were only supposed to fail enough to send her off the road, not over a cliff. Unfortunate, but necessary. And now you're threatening my daughter? Richard, be reasonable. Eva is asking questions, accessing records. She's becoming a liability just like Eleanor was." "I won't let you touch her," Garrison declared. "This ends now. I've secured evidence against all of us. You, me, Miller, everyone involved. One call from me and it all goes to the FBI. You'd implicate yourself?" Chambers sounded genuinely surprised. "To protect Eva? Yes. I've failed as a father, failed as a husband. I won't fail at this." The recording ended with Chambers saying ominously, "We'll discuss this tomorrow. Think carefully about what you're doing, Richard." There would be no tomorrow for Judge Garrison. Armed with this evidence, the FBI and local authorities launched a coordinated operation to apprehend everyone implicated in the conspiracy. By dawn, arrests had been made across Oak Ridge, the police chief, 2 county commissioners, the mayor, and several Westfield executives. But Edward Chambers remained elusive. District Attorney Bennett, himself implicated in the cover-ups, struck a deal to avoid prosecution. In exchange for testimony against Chambers, he provided crucial information. Chambers kept a private plane fueled and ready at a small airfield just outside town. Reynolds and a tactical team raced to the airfield, arriving just as Chambers' black SUV pulled onto the tarmac. The private jet's engines were already warming up. "FBI, stop the vehicle!" Agent Morgan shouted through a megaphone. Instead, the SUV accelerated toward the waiting plane. Officers opened fire on the vehicle's tires, sending it skidding across the runway until it crashed into a fuel truck. Agents surrounded the smoking vehicle, weapons drawn. But Edward Chambers wasn't. Inside, the driver, his personal security chief, had been alone. Back at the Garrison house, now a secondary command post for the operation, Eva stood in her childhood bedroom, packing a small bag of essentials. With her name cleared and the conspiracy exposed, she would be relocated to a safe house until Chambers was apprehended. "You'll be under 24-hour protection," Reynolds assured her. "Chambers has nowhere to hide." Eva nodded absently, her attention on a photograph of her mother she was carefully wrapping in tissue paper. "He'll never stop coming for me. I'm the only witness who can place his friend at my father's murder scene." A commotion downstairs interrupted them, shouting, then a crash. Reynolds drew his weapon and pushed Eva behind him as footsteps pounded up the stairs. Agent Morgan appeared in the doorway, her expression grim. "We found Martha Wilson." "Where?" Reynolds demanded. "In Chambers' wine cellar. She's alive, but barely, and she had this." Morgan held up a blood-stained business card. Written on the back in shaky handwriting was a single word: boathouse. Eva's face drained of color. "The hunting property. My father's boathouse on Crestwater Lake. Chambers has a bunker there. I heard them talking about it once." As tactical teams mobilized toward the lake property, Reynolds received an urgent call from the tech team analyzing the memory card. They'd found something disturbing in the metadata, evidence suggesting some recordings had been edited weeks before Judge Garrison's death. "What exactly are you saying?" Reynolds asked. "Someone tampered with these files before they were hidden," the technician explained. "They're authentic recordings, but portions have been removed and others rearranged to change the context of conversations." Reynolds looked at Eva with newfound suspicion. "Who else knew about these recordings before your father died?" Before Eva could answer, the radio crackled with urgent news. Officers had reached the lake property and found Edward Chambers, dead from an apparent suicide, a gun in his hand and a typed confession beside him. The case seemed finally closed. The conspiracy exposed, justice served. But as Reynolds studied Eva's face, showing relief, yet something else, something almost like disappointment, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were still missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. What if the perfect victim had orchestrated the perfect crime? 3 months after Edward Chambers' suicide, Oak Ridge was slowly healing. The environmental cleanup had begun, with federal oversight ensuring Westfield Industries would finally be held accountable. Families affected by the contamination had filed a class action lawsuit that would likely result in a historic settlement. Eva Garrison had been fully exonerated. After spending 2 weeks in protective custody following Chambers' death, she returned briefly to Oak Ridge to sell her family home before moving to her maternal grandmother's residence in another state. The community that had once vilified her now hailed her as a victim who had stood strong against a powerful conspiracy. On her final day in town, Eva visited her parents' graves, placing flowers at both markers. Detective Reynolds watched from a respectful distance, still troubled by questions he couldn't quite articulate. Later that afternoon, as Eva packed the last of her belongings, Reynolds paid a final visit to the Garrison house. He found her in her father's study, carefully wrapping a framed photograph of her mother. "I wanted to say goodbye," Reynolds said, "and to return this." He handed her the diary that had been held as evidence. Eva accepted it with a small smile. "Thank you for believing in me when no one else would." Reynolds nodded, studying her face. The traumatized teenager was gone, replaced by a composed young woman with clear eyes and steady hands. "There's just one thing I still don't understand," he said casually. "The memory card hidden in your diary? The technicians say some recordings were edited weeks before your father's death. But according to you, you only found out about his recordings the night before. He was killed." Eva's expression didn't change. "My father must have edited them himself, trying to protect certain people, perhaps." "Perhaps." Reynolds wandered to the window, looking out at the manicured lawn. "I also reviewed the timeline again. The night your mother died, you were at a school debate competition in River Valley. There's a photograph of you receiving an award at exactly 8:17 p.m., the same time your mother's car went off that cliff 30 miles away. I know. That's why no one ever suspected me." Eva's voice had changed, cooler, more precise. Reynolds turned, his suspicions confirmed by her slip. "But I never said anything about suspecting you for your mother's death." The mask fell away completely as Eva set down the photograph, her movements deliberate and unhurried. "My mother wasn't gathering evidence against Westfield," she said quietly. "That was my construction. She was having an affair with Edward Chambers, had been for years. My father knew. They had an arrangement. Then why did she die? Because I found out." Eva's eyes were cold, emotionless. "Not just about the affair, but about the contamination. People in my school were getting sick. 3 cases of leukemia in 1 year. I started investigating, connecting dots. When I confronted my mother, she admitted knowing about Westfield's dumping. She'd helped cover it up to protect her lover." Reynolds felt ice in his veins as the truth emerged. "So you planned her accident?" "I merely ensured justice. The debate competition provided my alibi. I told her I needed her signature on a permission slip before she left town. When she stopped at that lookout point to meet me, I wasn't there, but I'd already loosened her brake lines." Reynolds struggled to process this revelation. "And your father? He began to suspect after finding my research. The night before he died, he confronted me, not with accusations about my mother, but with his own guilt. He thought I was gathering evidence against Westfield." Eva laughed softly. "He confessed everything, trying to protect me from a danger that didn't exist. Offered to take down Chambers himself. So you shot him. I couldn't let him play the hero, not after years of enabling those criminals. Besides, his plan would have exposed my role in Mother's death. So yes, I waited until he turned away and I used his own gun. And Judge Miller? Chambers? All the evidence? Miller was easy to frame. He'd been at our house that morning. I planted evidence, manipulated recordings, created a trail that implicated everyone who deserved punishment. Then I allowed myself to be accused. knowing the inconsistencies would eventually be found. A victim is above suspicion, detective. You planned everything. Reynolds realized. Every detail. Justice requires precision. Eva met his gaze directly. And now you face a dilemma. You can reveal the truth, but without evidence, it's your word against mine. I've already been acquitted. Double jeopardy applies. Or you can let me walk away knowing that the people who poisoned this town have paid for their crimes. Reynolds' hand moved toward his weapon, but Eva shook her head. That's not who you are. You believe in justice, and so do I. We just define it differently. As sunset painted the room in golden light, Reynolds made his choice. He would live with the burden of knowing, the weight of an imperfect justice, because sometimes the law and the truth travel separate paths. Eva Garrison left Oak Ridge that evening, her innocence intact in the eyes of the world. The perfect victim who had orchestrated the perfect crime, a young girl who had appointed herself judge, jury, and executioner. And somewhere, in a town not unlike Oak Ridge, a teenage girl watches the news about corporate pollution going unpunished, corrupt officials escaping consequences. She thinks about Eva Garrison's story, the official version, and wonders if justice sometimes requires taking matters into one's own hands. The cycle continues, and another perfect crime begins to form.